What is much more traumatic than most people realize? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. Being the peacekeeper in a toxic or dysfunctional family, you grow up thinking it's normal to suppress your needs to keep everyone else calm, and it messes with your sense of self more than you realize. Answer: I've been that person as the middle child, but it's also traumatizing to look back as an adult and realize how much an older sibling was protecting me and jumping in front of bullets. During summer break from school, there were days when my sister would tell me to go outside and play, and she meant now. I could see it on her face and hear it in her voice. Soon after that, I would hear my mother start screaming at my sister so loud we could hear it at the other end of the block. My friends would look at me and I was so embarrassed I would just look down at whatever toys we were playing with. My sister made herself the target of my mother's abuse and protected me. Story 2. Dealing with a family member with dementia. Edit. Just to be clear, I'm not referring to the sadness of losing a loved one or being heartbroken when they can't remember my name. I'm talking about what it does to your psyche and the trauma to your very own well-being. The PTSD was something I wasn't warned about. The panic attacks. The terror of going to sleep at night alone. My career didn't survive. My marriage didn't survive. And I almost didn't survive. It's better now, but it's been a difficult road. Answer: definitely. When my mom had it, I was torn between respecting her as my mother and making decisions for her that she fought against because she didn't think she needed help. It felt so disrespectful to have to treat her like a child. Luckily, I had older siblings who were better at taking charge than I was because I always gave in and let her have her way. Story 3. Growing up in a household where you constantly had to manage other people's emotions. It teaches you to ignore your own needs, and that love is something you have to earn by walking on eggshells. Answer: I had this life. Don't say or do anything that will cause a temper tantrum. My father was thought to be a swell guy outside the house, but when it's just us, he was a gaslighting, racist, bipolar, hoarder who over-medicated and went crazy whenever he gets called out by mom on how he treats us. The argument usually ended there as mom and I both retreat to our rooms to wait out the storm. Video games kept me sane. I don't think mom coped so well as she started having bouts of delirium near the end of her life. Hard to watch. I was to blame for being lazy and not helping them out more, according to my dad. Mom died in April 2nd, 2018. Dad died the same day, 2 years later, of COVID. He made sure his attorney knew it was my fault this happened to the family. Other than dad's life insurance money, which they had to give me, I never saw a dime neither from the sale of the house or from the lawsuit of the nursing home where mom had been kept in her final months. They were neglectful, and she had bumps and bruises when I would visit from falling out of her bed. I still have trauma, according to my therapist, because I have days where I feel like everyone is mad at me and I'm in trouble, even though I can't remember what I did wrong. Story 4. Betrayal. Never knew how painful it was until I experienced it, and my entire life got flipped upside down because of it. Answer: betrayal from someone you never thought would hurt you is unbelievably hard to move on from. Someone I considered one of my best friends absolutely destroyed me, to the point I could barely eat for over a month. I basically lived off of smoothies. The constant and extreme anxiety was the worst I have ever experienced. Still haven't moved past it and don't know if I ever will. Story 5. Bed bugs. People eliminate themselves over infestations for a reason. It's actual psychological torture. Answer: if I ever get bed bugs again, I'm burning the house down. I once had them bad and couldn't figure out how to get rid of them. Looking back, I saw the signs early, but didn't put 2 and 2 together. So there were times when I couldn't sleep in my own bed because the fuckers were all over me. Eventually, I got a can of Raid bedbug killer that said it lasted 6 weeks, sprayed down my entire bed and the carpet around it, and hit any bugs directly. Thankfully, they never left the area around the bed, so that was enough. They all died and never came back. Story 6. Growing up and not showed love by your parents. No hugs, no kisses, no good job. I'm proud of you, nothing. My parents never showed affection to each other either. It's hard. Answer: I feel that. It's awful. I'll never forget being at a friend's baby shower. One of friend's aunts approached my mom and gushed about how I was working full-time, finishing my PhD, planning a wedding, and had just published in a journal. My mom's reaction? I'm not proud of her. Why would I be proud of something who is doing what is expected? I cried in the bathroom shortly afterwards. Story 7. Having severe anxiety as a child, not knowing why you're terrified all the time, and being afraid to tell anyone because you're afraid people will think you're crazy or a private area. Being too shy to talk to people, so making friends is hard, and other idiot children deeming you a weirdo loser. So, school becomes a nightmare that you're legally forced into 7 hours a day, 5 days a week. The amount I wish I could go back in time and tell my parents I needed help is ridiculous. Answer: I've had this exact same experience. It was so bad I was selectively mute. I had no friends from elementary to high school. I don't understand how my parents or any teachers didn't do anything. I remember only being sent to the counselor one time, and I remember telling them I was always scared of my family dying or something bad going to happen. Nothing came of that. I clearly had severe anxiety and OCD. It's straight up neglect. Story 8. Not being able to find a diagnosis when your doctor has tried almost everything. Just had another test not show anything conclusive, and honestly, I'm so tired and trying not to cry in the hospital, Warren. Makes me feel like maybe I'm just being dramatic and people actually always feel this way. Answer: I hear you. I feel I need to tell this, not to worry you, but to say it is okay to keep pushing to get something diagnosed, or at least explained. My wife had been experiencing various pains and was routinely fobbed off by doctors who failed to understand pain in women. She had asked many times to be tested for cancer and was told at 32 she was too young to be worrying about that. A year later, she was diagnosed with stage 4 liver cancer. By this time, it had spread basically everywhere, and chemo was never going to stop it. She passed a year later. I don't know how much better things would have been if they tested earlier, but it does make me angry sometimes. She forgave the doctors who apologized after she was diagnosed, but the whole experience of hospitals, tests, diagnoses, chemo really opened my eyes to how poorly women are treated by the whole health system. And I am ashamed to admit that I also minimized her pain before the diagnosis. I wish I had listened to her and supported her position regarding her body and how it felt to her. I know better now. Story 9. Friendships ending. When relationships end badly, there is more of an acknowledgement of the impacts, but I've been way more impacted by close friendships ending. Answer: losing friendships is tough. I've been through a couple of friendships that have ended badly. It's difficult, and I feel like it doesn't really get the recognition it needs. I've had friendships that have started to turn sour, and when I've asked for advice, I've been told to just stop talking with those people. But it's not that simple. When you deeply care about someone, you want to find a way to make it work even when you know it's not going to. And when it does end, it's heartbreaking. Story 10. I would say all those little insults thrown your way when you were younger, oh, they didn't mean anything. Don't be so sensitive, etc. Decades later, you have not forgotten the words said to you, and you are still hurt by them. Words can hurt for life. Answer: yeah, my 13, you just brought something up that happened 9 months ago that still bothered him. He thought I was making fun of him for something he didn't know, but was just a misunderstanding. I couldn't even remember what the situation was be. He certainly did because of how it made him feel. As a parent, you have to be conscious of how you say things and how it might impact your child. I felt pretty bad when he told me that. I had no idea. Story 11. Moving often. I had to leave so many childhood friends behind, never to be seen again. And being the new kid so often has given me crippling social anxiety. Answer: I've dealt with a few of the things listed in other posts in this thread, but moving often is what I think shaped me more than any of the others. I can be bubbly and friendly and overall come across well in most settings, and I'm absolutely fine at talking with anybody, but it's like there's this disconnect between that step and the step where you actually become friends that I really struggle with. I do have friends, but I'm just very bad at getting past that hurdle most of the time. Story 12. Guilt being the go-to teaching method as a kid. I'm 33 years old, and only in recent years of therapy am I realizing the effect that had on me. As a kid, I was guilted for being mad at my bullies, having depression, setting boundaries, for feeling out of place, and for having other emotions that I later found out were perfectly normal. And now I'm still trying to unravel the deep-seated dread I feel when I step out of line with anything or am not 100 grateful for every shortcoming in my life. Story 13. Food shaming when you're young. The juxtaposition of, should you really be eating all that? And you can't leave the table till you clean your plate, FD up my relationship with food so bad I'm still struggling 20 years later. Story 14. Emotional neglect. A parent spouse doesn't have to be outwardly hurtful, physically abusive, violent, loud, etc. in order for deep mental scars to form. Simply ignoring you is enough. You could have all your physical needs technically met and never suffer 1 ounce of physical harm, but there is nothing that makes up for being treated like you're just there. Story 15. Being pregnant giving birth. I realize that people recognize that giving birth can be traumatic, but pregnancy and birth can permanently alter your body in a lot of ways, including tripping autoimmune disorders that lay dormant in your body. Answer: we have a great OB at my job that will counsel women before birth that pregnancy, labor, and delivery are inherently traumatic. I think it's great because it manages the expectation that is perpetuated on social media that birth is beautiful if you do it the exact right way, buy my product, don't go to a hospital, blah, blah, blah. She says something like birth is beautiful, but it's common for it to tie as the best and worst day of your life. That doesn't mean anything is wrong. It just means that if you find it more traumatic than you thought it would be, that's a normal feeling. Story 16. What damn? Being in a friend group but not being treated like a friend. In one group, my friends only kept me around so that they could make fun of me and put me down regularly. In many others, I was basically left on the periphery of the group and was only called to hang out when they needed extra people. Or if someone called out last minute and they needed a replacement, really doesn't make me feel like I'm valued by anyone. Answer: having to initiate contact to be included, being left off getting asked to do things, hearing plans but never directly asked to come or participate. No one comes to the things you plan. It's exhausting and heartbreaking. And it's not like I'm a downer or complainer. I try to be fun. People seem to enjoy my company and conversations when I'm there, but never enough to be wanted when I'm not there. Story 17. Teasing by family members. Parents generally not liking their kids because they're different. Grew up in a family where I was the butt of a lot of jokes, and the family did a lot of unflattering impressions of me. Seems like society frowns upon this a lot more than when I was growing up, which is good. Story 18. Being neglected not only as a person, but as a young girl who had no one willing to teach me about anything. Story 19. Facing every kind of abuse as a child and always being told it's your fault. Then as an adult, finding out everyone in the family knew about it and did nothing because I was a difficult kid and it wasn't their business. Then being told I'm in my 30s and I just need to get over it already. Story 20. Not being able to afford medical care, so you have to put things off, knowing it's going to get worse, but the need doesn't change that you can't afford it. There are a lot of people I know who have this, particularly around dental care. Since it's so often categorized as its own thing rather than just part of medicine and health, there are generally far less options for help even in emergency situations, at least in the USA. Here you can go to the emergency room, get told without immediate treatment this will eliminate you, then get sent home with instructions to see a dentist for treatment as soon as possible. Story 21. Y'all are gonna laugh at me for this, but working customer service. I still get intense nightmares about rush hours, abusive customers, understaffing, and unrelenting work that never feels fast enough, even though you are doing everything that you can. It has me waking up in a cold sweat. Story 22. Never being praised or encouraged in any way. Growing up, nothing was good enough for my dad. I could always have done more. If I got poor grades, I was ridiculed. If I got good grades, I was told I must have cheated. Any drawing I was proud of was traced. Any sport I wanted to do, any instrument I wanted to play, any class I wanted to take, I would fail. He would complain that I was a picky eater, then get angry when I wanted to try something new because I would dislike it, and it would be a waste of money. He would complain that I didn't just know what chores to do, then get angry when I tried to do them anyway, with no guidance because I was doing them wrong. You stagnate very easily when there's no point to anything. Story 23. Never having a childhood because of parentification. Having to take care of your parents opposed to vice versa. Story 24. Living in a hoarder house. I've realized it really did mess me up a bit. It wasn't full hoarder when I was a kid, just embarrassingly cluttered. Now it's stuff stacked everywhere. And I'll offer to try clearing it up or throwing things out, and my mother will have some bullshit attachment to stuff that is just junk. It just makes me worry that when my folks pass, I might have to argue with my sister over getting rid of this stuff or be too old and weak myself to get rid of it all. It feels like mortality made into piles of real tangible objects stacked everywhere. Both sets of grandparents' houses were the fudge same too. Story 25. Losing a close friendship, especially without closure, is often far more traumatic than most people realize. Story 26. A miscarriage. Before my wife had one, I had always imagined it as super early, just a clump of cells. But we had seen him moving around. We had heard his heartbeat. We had chosen a name. Answer: legit. And having to dispose of your own baby's body. Lost mine at 14 weeks with spontaneous labor. Seeing our fully formed baby, it was shocking and devastating. I don't think society in general understands how developed babies are in the womb at that early stage. And medical professionals refusing to acknowledge that we lost a baby, only calling it an aborted fetus and suggesting that we bring it to them to put in their medical waste. It's unreal. Story 27. Long-term, think decade or more, cancer treatments. Most people think you're either going to die or end up in remission. Then there are those of us who have such aggressive cancer that nothing works except something that pauses it. The thing is, nobody knows how long the pause will last until it quits working. You're basically retired from being disabled from the damage this long of a fight has caused. You're trying to live a normal life around your health, but there is literally an axe held over your head at all times. It's the trauma of a chronic illness on steroids. Story 28. Having 247 access to breaking news. It creates a false sense of narrative that everything is bad all the time and that major crime incidents are happening constantly. Story 29. Being told that you cannot leave the table until you finish everything on the plate. Now I struggle with saying no, managing portion sizes and eating mindfully because I'm scared of seeming rude and disrespectful. Story 30. Being bullied by a sibling. People don't take it seriously because it's just kid stuff. But when you're a kid too, you're being tormented by someone bigger than you who lives in your house, so there's no escape. I told my husband recently some of the stuff my sister used to do to me. I told him some stuff before, but I don't think it'd gone into precise detail. For days afterwards, he just kept hugging me and saying, "You didn't deserve that. It's not normal." Answer: I've finally gone NC with my sibling bully and finally seeking therapy. They're older than me, so I didn't know life without their shadow being cast over me. And it took very long time to recognize what they were doing. Even when it got horrendously, unforgivably bad, my final straw was watching them do some awful stuff to our younger siblings. I recognize that it does seem like I tolerate things happening to me that I think are unacceptable when they happen to someone else. I'm finally seeking therapy for it, now in my early 30s. I got my intake appointment with a therapist in a few days. I'm so glad you have a wonderful husband who listened to you and responded how he did. It's frustrating how other family members are so dismissive. Story 31. Undiagnosed neurodivergence. Dyslexia, ADHD, dyspraxia, autism, etc. Theory is that the vast majority of prison inmates have some form of undiagnosed neurodivergent issue, as well as addicts and people with mental health problems. Growing up undiagnosed causes a tremendous output of trauma that often can never be repaired or overcome. Answer: working through this now as someone that was undiagnosed ADHD until 28. I came to believe so many negative things about myself that aren't true. I developed an anxiety disorder and a heart condition due to 28 years of putting myself under unneeded stress just to get anything done. I've been in therapy for a year and a half just trying to get my life together, unlearn unhealthy coping mechanisms that I've developed, and figure out how to take care of myself properly. And that's a good case scenario with going undiagnosed, as like you said, many undiagnosed adults end up with serious mental health and or substance abuse issues. So parents, please, if you have a child that is getting feedback about being disruptive in class or a gifted kid that is struggling with motivation and applying themselves, get them assessed. There are so many more resources for children than adults. I don't want my kid to feel different than other kids is not an excuse. They will still feel different. They just won't understand why and will think it's a personal failing. Story 32. People need to realize that not every person is traumatized by the same things. Some are fine after a car accident. Others have severe trauma. We are not all the same. This is not a competition. Story 33. Being neglected as a kid growing up not knowing how to understand the world mentally, emotionally. No basic life skills. Makes things that are easy to everyone around you terrifying to even try. Story 34. Maybe something people realize is traumatic, but not how traumatic, being restrained in the hospital. Being physically restrained in a psych ward is one of the most dehumanizing and traumatic things a person can go through. It's not just about being held down or tied up. It's the complete loss of autonomy, the fear, the helplessness, and often the lack of explanation or consent. You're treated like a danger instead of a person in crisis. Even if staff think they're keeping you safe, it can feel like punishment or control, not care. The psychological damage doesn't end when the restraints come off. For many people, it leaves lasting trauma, especially if you already have a history of abuse, PTSD, or difficulty trusting others. There absolutely needs to be more focus on trauma-informed care in psychiatric settings. Story 35. Parents who stay in horrible marriages just for their children. It teaches your children that it's better to stay in a bad relationship than leaving and being on your own. Story 36. Childhood experiences. If it was as easy as, you're an adult now, it's been X amount of years, get over it, we would have done it by now. Story 37. Chronic health problems. It's not a single traumatic event, it's repeated small traumas that teach you to act differently, It's every doctor who doesn't believe you. It's every family member who thinks you just need to get out more. It's every friend who thinks you should just stop worrying about it. This is all even worse if you don't yet have a diagnosis. Story 38. Being lied to by someone close to you may seem harmless, but I have seen it completely tear people apart. Especially people who have cheated, or partners and lied, or just lied about other important things. Story 39. So many, but one that I've just been realizing is the toll that autism masking takes on a person, never knowing how you're supposed to act, not understanding why people think you're acting weird, angry, disengaged. It's the emotional equivalent of living in a place where you can never learn the language, but nobody knows you're not from there. Story 40. Always being criticized by your family and never being understood. Being different from them and being treated as it's not okay to be you just because you are different from them. Story 41. Violation when you are a man. I was 4 or 5 and I still remember everything. And am 39, but the few peoples I have opened up just taught me to get over it. It was years ago. Answer. Honestly with you, the scary thing about stuff like this is the fact that many guys in the same situation will literally not remember it. Like some men have absolutely cataclysmic amnesia before they turn 12, 14. You ask them about their childhood, they literally cannot give an answer they don't know. So the number of victims might be far, far higher than anyone thinks. Story 42. All traumatized people will not deal with it as the public has speculated. It's entirely individual and a darn miracle if you're able to attain healing. I've been very blessed with mitigation by grandparents and others who, by their struggle, gave me courage to face mine. Still, it took 55 years at least to feel the lessons of the struggle ameliorated the pain of it. Ultimately, there's reason to be grateful I survived. Millions never even disclose. 90%. The public just cannot know how deep trauma is not appreciated nor understood in our country. My heartfelt empathy and respect for all survivors of CSA and all other abuse. Story 43. Betrayal trauma. My partner of 12 years left me for my best friend of 10 years, and the grief has been almost unbearable. Weekly therapy since April has helped a lot, but I still never feel like I'll be completely whole again. Story 44. Your child's emotional pain. My teen daughter had a friend die in that Kerrville flood. I can't tell her it will be okay. I can't tell her it doesn't matter. I can only tell her the pain and loss is valid and crying is a good thing. And it hurts me to see her hurt while she processes what it really means to be alive. Story 45. Being autistic, people only ever talk about how it affects others around us, parents or siblings, for example, but they don't realize how much harder everything in life is for us and how more easily we can be traumatized by everyday things. Story 46. Having cancer. Even if you survive, like I did, I think everyone gets a little PTSD. I don't think other people realize how mentally traumatizing it is. Story 47. Being bullied at work. People tell you to just get another job. Not so easy when you're over 50, a minority, and you have a sick family member that requires insurance to afford medical care. Story 48. Not getting diagnosed until you're an adult with things like autism and ADHD. Oh, you mean I've been hating myself my entire life for no reason? Thanks. Story 49. Having your car stolen. Happened to me last month. You feel violated and then frustrated by insurance. Story 50. Losing a loved one to tragic end. Experiencing psychosis and getting involuntarily committed to a mental institution. And yes, I'm aware these things sound traumatic. I still intended this reply. Story 51. Attending school and university. A decade later, I still have dreams that I still need that one last math course in order to graduate, and I wake up stressed about it. These types of dreams in reality are symptoms of PTSD. Story 52. Bullying in school. Many people write it off once in adulthood, saying to move on without appreciating the lasting impact it can have. Story 53. Your dad is on the other side of the planet in the military. Your cheating mother just moves out to the other side of the country, leaving your siblings alone. Your oldest sister is 12 and you're 8. Story 54. Moving a lot as a child, changing your school, friends, church, and community every couple of years. Story 55. Getting hit by your parents as a child. The one argument that I refuse to fight is when someone says, yeah, my parents beat me a lot growing up, but I'm better for it. People have all sorts of definitions for a beating, but I'm not going to try to challenge that argument because all I'm going to do is boil my own blood. And no, I'm not a fan of submissive parenting either. I was just very abused growing up, mostly emotionally, but the trauma is still there. Story 56. Not actually being molested by a family member, but being raised within a family where several family members were molested by an elder family member, and the consensus of the entire family is to hide it and never talk about it. You notice all these mental health problems within your family members, but never know the cause until you're an adult and one or more of them start to divulge the history of your family to you. And you find out the one you loved and trusted destroyed the others with evil shoot, and all your past judgments of the hurt ones was uncalled for, as they were heavily traumatized, and you never knew as you picked them apart in your mind for their social and mental shortcomings. Hiding this stuff from generations of family members just starts a chain of dominoes tumbling down that causes more and more problems down the line. You have to face this stuff and work on your health and protect your family's health by opening up about it and being there for one another. Story 57. Rough childhoods. People always say they won't remember or kids are resilient, but that's just something adults tell themselves to feel better. Most kids just don't show how fudge up they are until they become adults. Story 58. Being groped or intimacy touched against your will. People play it off like someone getting felt up is a joke. Movies make it seem like a little lighthearted boys will be boys or whatever. But when it happens to you, it's incredibly violating. Whether you're a woman who is groped on public transit or a man who is touched by his boss, having your bodily autonomy taken away because someone wants a cheap thrill is a disgusting feeling. Story 59. Hearing about other people's trauma. Secondary PTSD is real but often minimized or downplayed by society and especially the person going through it. It's difficult to let yourself recognize the severity of your feelings, especially when you compare yourself against the person that directly experienced the trauma. Story 60. Being the fringe friend. Included, but somehow still always on the outskirts, feeling like you never truly belong. Story 61. Being depressed without any specific traumatic event that justifies it. You get all the perks of depression, and on top of that, you feel so guilty that you can't be a functional human, and you're a huge burden to your family because of nothing or small things that shouldn't be such a big deal. Just writing this, I feel I'm offending people who actually suffered, but I literally lost a decade of my life because of this. And the fact it was over nothing won't bring that time back. Story 62. Being isolated alone, even in the middle of crowds communities. Not having healthy relationships. Not having any human guidance support. Story 63. Violation. The person that existed before the violation is dead, and a cherry on top for trauma, should you get pregnant from said violation and are forced to carry that rapist's baby. A form of hell on earth type of shoot. Story 64. Violation and intimacy abuse. Most people already rightfully assume it's really bad, but most people have no clue just how much it affects you. It's not just the violation of your privacy in your own body, it's twisting something around that is supposed to be fun and enjoyable into something incredibly painful and even downright dangerous. The after effects of it feel so much worse than the actual act itself, in my opinion. Worst part is the betrayal. In my own case, he was my best friend. I thought he was the sweetest and nicest person, but in reality, he's a sadistic monster. Story 65. Watching Andor performing CPR, or even witnessing a situation that it has to happen, even if you don't witness the actual resuscitation efforts. I witnessed a woman collapse and was the first to her side on the ground. She was not responding or moving. Thankfully, someone who was a nurse ran up to help, and as soon as I heard she didn't have a pulse, I knew to not watch any further, but shift my efforts to make sure 911 was being called. I still had a hard time dealing with what I saw, when all I really witnessed was a woman falling on the ground and not getting up. I later found out she had a pre-existing heart issue, had been at the cardiologist earlier that day, and had likely passed as she fell down. Knowing that there was nothing I could have done to help her helped me process, but it was still hard. Story 66. Losing your first and only twins babies on 21 weeks because of COVID, then a close friend died, then your last parent dying, all in 2 years period, and you are just 28 and really alone in this. Then following by war on your motherland, you can even visit your parents on the graveyard. Not one time. I don't think that much of people truly can understand how it is. Story 67. Having constant, frequent digs made at you about your insert competence, physical appearance, personality, interests, etc. by other people. It will tear your self-esteem to shreds over time. It's particularly egregious if it's a parent or other role model figure in your life. Story 68. Having done bad stuff that you regret. It's obviously horrible experiencing. Bad things being done to you. Criminality, bullying, cheating, etc. But I think the people who have done stuff like this in the past and outgrown the bad habits, or just simply did them as one-time situations out of stupidity, an adult beverage or their own problems or trauma, and then realizing what they have done and how much they have hurt others. That can develop into its own sort of trauma, hating yourself and not being able to undo it, other than trying to be a better person. Story 69. Putting down your pet. Had to do it at the end of April, and I haven't been the same since. Not the fact that we had to do it, because it was the right thing to do for my little guy, but watching it happen and him being alive 1 minute and gone the next. I'm 32 and never went through this before, so it was horrible. Story 70. Poverty. Having the constant anxiety of not knowing whether you'll be able to afford even your basic needs. Even if your financial situation later stabilizes, you keep feeling that. Story 71. Being told weekly from early childhood on that judgment will happen any day now and believing you will never grow up. Story 72. Having a parent that loves you with their whole heart but mistreats the other parent, sometimes in front of you. Story 73. Having a cool parent who's always tipsy high and tries to pressure you into doing substances with them as a child. Jerk ran into my room off his head at 3 a.m. on my 15th birthday, telling me it's time I become a man. And he threw a bag of cocaine at me and handed me a plate and straw and kept on pressuring me to do it after I said no multiple times. I've thought about that night nearly every day since, and when I told my friends, they just laughed it off and said I was lucky. Story 74. Passing of a friend. It's wrong and I'm working on it, but am very jaded making new friends because of it. Story 75. Having a narcissistic borderline personality disorder mother that expects you and or everyone else to take care of her financially and by giving her shelter. Story 76. Raised with the fear of losing everything because you don't have enough money. My parents were broke, and my dad led me to believe that we were one paycheck away from being homeless and having nothing. Now that I'm older, I think that he was full of shoot and just didn't want to fork over money when it came to me. My brother got to play whatever sports he wanted, and he got the new gear he needed. If he had a toothache, he was taken to the dentist. If the optometrist said that he needed glasses, he probably would have been able to pick whichever glasses he wanted, no matter the price. When I asked to play sports, I got a huge hours-long rant about money and how we didn't have any. And then when I was asked if I really wanted to play sports, yes. How could I have said yes if it meant that we would be living on the streets because of it? I was only taken to the doctor if it was a government school requirement for a physical or vaccine. I was never seen by a dentist until I reached adulthood. An audiologist told my parents that I needed hearing aids in middle school, but they didn't do shoot. My dad was worried that it would cost too much. My brother broke my nose twice, and my dad refused to allow my mom to take me in to get it set, as he was worried that it would have raised his insurance premium, and now my nose is crooked, and I'm pretty sure I have a deviated septum, but instead of seeing a doctor about getting it fixed, because I worry about the money I don't have, I'm constantly thinking and worrying about money, even if I have the money. Story 77. Hear me out. Essay. Most people know that it's horrible, but unless you have experienced it yourself, you don't know. You don't really know how it affects every aspect of your life, forever. Story 78. Eliu. Go from having excellent executive functioning skills, motivation, focus, and strength and stamina, to executive DYS function, extreme exhaustion, anhedonia, physical weakness, and almost zero focus, which leads to having to take a break from an almost 14th century career with one employer in an industry you know and love that isn't in peril of demise. Fudge menopause. Story 79. Being a sign language interpreter. Interpreting itself gives you vicarious trauma. Interpreting for deaf people adds a whole new layer because you witness the discrimination and bigotry, but are often powerless to do anything about it. You cannot tell a deaf person they're being scammed if you're a video relay interpreter. Helps deaf PPL use the phone. Even if you know it, you watch the medical staff deny you entry to the patient's appointment, even though they literally need you there. Well, she can talk, so the fudge what? She can't hear. I've told people they have terminal cancer. I've been a student observer at a phone center where a deaf person called 911. Just so you know, you see the emergency on screen. I don't miss being an ASL interpreter, but I will say there were plenty of good moments. Interpreting for deaf mama at her newborn app after she had had a miscarriage before, that I also interpreted. Graduations, funny teenagers, being able to swoop in last minute for a pro bono funeral service for the deaf person's own brother, many meaningful experiences. Story 80. Being physically attacked overpowered. It's crazy how permanent the impact is, knowing that there are other humans who are willing to harm you or restrain you for their own personal benefit, especially when you know and trusted that person. Story 81. Being separated from your birth parent. Even if you're adopted into the best, most supportive, loving, stable, and prepared family, being separated from your biological parents is traumatic down to a biological level. I'm not anti-adoption by any means, but children who are adopted need so much more support. Adopting as an infant when they're too young to remember doesn't erase biological trauma. Story 82. ICE kidnapping people off the streets to fill a quota. National Guard being called in to assist against governor's wishes. Innocent people being mistreated, sent to prisons for crimes they never committed, sent to prisons in countries they've never been to, and some even eliminate. There are very few violent criminals caught. Being here legal means nothing because it's been revoked for no reason. Some citizenships being revoked, National Guard and ICE saying we should be used to seeing them patrolling in our communities. Concentration camps already being planned in strategic places across the United States. They aren't done with picking groups of people to go after. If you don't have any empathy for those suffering now, you might look around one day and wonder how you ended up in one of these camps. The trauma is in these people. The trauma is watching this happen. The trauma is watching as no one is stopping it. The trauma is waiting to be next. There isn't a safe group. So even if a person voted for this, if you're under a certain income level, have a certain of color in your skin, donated once to a Democratic candidate 25 years ago, you live in a certain state or area of a state, or the wind blows up the tree funny, you could very well on the next group on the list. This whole big bullying bill is traumatic, but in focusing on this is trauma. Story 83. The moment you realize you will die. Most of us don't even remember it, but we are never the same afterward. There is who you were before you knew and who you were after. Answer. I remember it. I was about 4, supposed to be asleep, but my great aunt had just died. I had experienced the loss of pets before, so I knew what it meant to die, but I hadn't extrapolated that to people, and it just sort of hit me. I recall just staring at the bottom of the top bunk of my bunk bed and just like thinking about it as much as a 4-year-old could. The shoot thing was, my family didn't tell me she died. I overheard them talking about it, and I basically confronted them, and they were like, "Oh, we thought you knew." I'm Fudge 4, I don't know anything unless someone tells me, or I guess I overhear it. Story 84. Someone pretending they are your friend, and then it turns out they were just using you. I have trust issues. Story 85. Being a pastor's kid, I think that Catholics do a lot of shoot wrong, but there's some wisdom behind the priest not being allowed to have children. Story 86. Caregiving, providing round-the-clock care for an elderly, bedbound, incontinent parent with dementia. It's every bit as confining as being in prison. The only way to escape is when the person dies and the caregiver is left with guilt feelings of, did I do enough? I was my mother's caregiver for 3 years. A year and a half after she died, my spouse had a stroke and I had to start over. His situation in as dire, but the stroke not only severely affected his cognition imbalance, it magnified his narcissism. When I visit my mother's grave, I stand there thinking how lucky she is that her problems are over. Story 87. Getting rejected over and over again. Being the bright child with lots of opportunities just to have it all destroyed by mental illnesses. Being on your own 100 all the time. No notifications coming in. No reactions on your social media posts. I could KMS on live and no one would care. Always being the loser underperformer among your workplace peers. Getting placed against your will in a locked-up mental facility as a child. Having no one to call when you feel distressed or maybe even had a rare positive experience. When ChatGPT is your only communication partner. Edit typos. Story 88. Long-term illness or severe illness. Poor housing environment as well. Insect infestation, mold, unsafe environment, etc. I know someone who had a bedbug infestation who's still traumatized from it. Story 89. Losing a parent to old age. It's even more traumatic than you realize. You know it's impactful, you know it's a big deal, but often it seems expected if they were sick for a while or they had already lived a long while. People don't quite realize how much of their life they framed around their parents, even if they didn't get along with them, especially if they didn't get along with them. Suddenly having that gaping hole hits you in ways you don't even realize and may not realize for quite a long time. That's how traumatic it is. It's still hitting you even after you think the worst is over. Your whole way of being and thinking in the world is being reorganized, and maybe not in an entirely healthy way. Story 90. Always being the odd one out throughout childhood, especially as a neurodivergent person. No matter how much care and attention I put into being as cordial as possible, the results were always the same. I remember encountering classmates who would be nice to everyone but uncharacteristically cold towards me for no reason. Always the first one to get kicked out of a too large group in PE or class projects, always getting picked last for teams, and always the one who stepped out of the frame to take a group photo. These seem like small things, but the pain accumulates over time. It reached a point where I seriously questioned if any of my peers would even care if I died or disappeared. At a certain point, all I wanted was to feel seen by them, but I couldn't even get that. Many years later, I'm still hurting. My parents tell me to chin up and just get over it, but that's easy to say if you don't have more than 2 decades of anger, resentment, and heartbreak bottled up within you. You can't just turn that chute off like a light switch. Story 91. The emotional hell that is being an undiagnosed child on the spectrum and trying to navigate a world that isn't made for you without guidance. I'm ADHD. Fast forward to anxiety, depression, CPTSD, tragic end ideations, addiction, severe isolation, etc. Story 92. Growing up in poverty and eventually becoming financially stable in adulthood. It's hard to see the people where you came from who haven't been able to escape out of poverty, and they look at you as though you aren't one of them anymore. And similarly, you don't fit in with the middle or upper class folks around you who never had to struggle early in life. You're not one of them either. Story 93. One of the most overlooked traumas is growing up with emotional neglect when those who should love you unconditionally are distant or dismissive. This silent pain shapes your self-worth and relationships deeply, often without you realizing it. Healing takes time, and many don't notice the damage until it becomes overwhelming. Story 94. Having an invisible disability. There's a lot of barriers that get thrown up when you look outwardly normal, but really aren't. Story 95. Losing your parents at an age so young that you don't remember them. People told me, how can you miss what you never had? Since I was an infant when my mother died. Or my Sil saying to my grandmother, I don't know why Yellow Forsythia asks about her mother. I can't understand why she'd be upset about that since she never really knew her. So much therapy. Sigh. Story 96. Intimacy assault, apparently. I still remember Brock Turner's lawyer or somebody arguing that his life shouldn't be ruined for 20 minutes of action. No discussion about how that action was likely to alter the trajectory of his victim's life or her potential. The most maddening part is that people will fully acknowledge that it's a heinous crime in the abstract. As soon as you get specific and the perpetrator is someone who doesn't fit their assumptions, they start making excuses. Story 97. Toxic positivity. Hiding everything that's wrong just so things look perfect from the outside, or when you want to speak up when something is fudge up, but it backfires on you because you're rocking the boat. Everything is fine. No, it's actually not. Story 98. Having to watch your 5-year-old suffer in immense pain for 6 months before dying of cancer sure fudge me up. I understand people think it fudge you up, but it really fudge you up far more than I expected possible. Story 99. Not being believed by people who otherwise love you. Being doubted and invalidated about your genuine experiences in reality. Story 100. Intimacy assault. People think a simple touch in the wrong area is just a touch, but they don't realize how much it affects the victim. They think about it all the time. It keeps them up at night as they ponder what they could have done differently, or what they could have done to avoid it in the first place. It makes them hyper-aware of every person's eyes, movements, body language, etc. It's something that affects someone for years, if not for a lifetime. Story 101. Perimenopause. Years that slip by growing more and more problems, not knowing hormones are the cause. Terrible medical system to navigate. New body, not a sexy one. New brain, not a functioning one. Emotional wreck. You just want to hide from the new human you become. Story 102. Living with a clean freak. I've lost so many sentimental items and ideas because someone thought they were junk. Story 103. When kink play goes too far. From what I've seen and read, casual BDSM kink play has been becoming more and more mainstream. You see more and more posts about guys just assuming that the woman they're with is going to be into spanking, choking, etc. And in my experience, that's because a larger percentage of women is into it these days. So you get guys starting to assume it's on the table without discussion. That is obviously wrong. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the people that are into it in a light kink play level. So coupled with that increased interest, I see more couples adventuring into kink spaces than ever before. But the problem is, you get these couples experimenting with things without proper safety procedure and without proper pre-talk planning. They venture into something they're just trying out. And although if both people are into it, things like choking, bondage, CNC, etc. can be a lot of fun when you stay within the bounds. A lot of couples seem to think, oh well, if we venture too far, we've got a safe word, and that it's just like hitting the brakes in your car if you feel like you're going a little too fast. But it's not. If you hit the safe word moment, it very often ends with pretty much immediate low-level PTSD. You end up with women or men that are terrified of intimacy. It can take months and sometimes years to turn back that clock and get comfortable with having intimacy with a partner again. I have met far too many women these days that thought because they liked a little choking or some spanking or thought that a little bondage would be fun or thought it would be fun to wake up to a partner giving oral or having intimacy, etc., and ran into a trusted partner that entirely by accident pushed things just a little too far. And despite immediate stoppage when things went sideways, it still left her with huge issues and fears about intimacy months or years later. They have trouble sleeping next to man now or constantly second-guessing while having intimacy, can't get out of their head to enjoy it because they can't relax, can't get turned on anymore because it brings up fears and trauma, etc., etc. Know your limit, play within it, and don't think that just because you can stop or you've discussed a safe word that means your partner won't have lasting effects from hitting that safe word. Story 104. A bad dentist medical professional apt. I love getting him teeth cleaned, brushed, the fluoride, all of it since I was a kid. Then one day when I was 14-ish, I needed some spare canines, 4 extra, removed BC. I was getting braces. Everything was okay, but they took too long to come back and actually start the removal that by the time they actually were removing the last 2, I started feeling the tooth being broken cut. And the very last one, I 100 felt that meanie. I felt such a horrid pain. And they dropped the tooth on my chest covered in blood, and I bled all over myself too. When I got out, I was very pale. I'm Hispanic, but very tan. And a day or 2 later, my mom and I reported them to the BBBBC aside from my incident. My sister had a hand bruise on her face. They squeezed too hard when she couldn't breathe BC of a stuffy nose. 8 on yo at the time. And my brother always fought back BC. They always tied him up, 5 AO the time. I had already gotten braces, but had them adjusted for the teeth removal and BC of my traumatic experience. Even now, as a 27 yo, I still get an elevated heart rate sometimes at the dentist orthodontist when I went, but have had much better providers since 3. Story 105. No one even likes you. It wasn't just social anxiety. Learning your friends are not actually your friends, despite however long you've known them, been in the group. The betrayal runs so deep and sharp, and it's relentless. Metaphorically, the wound never heals, and you just learn how to cover up and hide this massive gaping wound. You become a shell of a person. Story 106. Losing a pet. I had my cat since he was a kitten when I was around 15. He lived until I was 34. That was half my life I had him by my side. He was my shadow. Story 107. Systemic discrimination. Having your entire existence being boiled down to a stereotype that other people made up about your entire identity, many times before you were even born, can wreak havoc on the mind and body. Story 108. Suddenly losing a pet to illness. We lost our tabby boy a few years ago to a cancer we had no idea was growing in his chest until it was too late. We at least were able to do kitty hospice and have him home to bring a vet out to the house so he could go at home where he was most comfortable and around his siblings. But it traumatized me so much that I am hyper vigilant about the health of our remaining 3 kitties. It didn't help our tuxedo got diagnosed with cancer in his arm less than 6 months after we lost our tabby boy. But at least we caught that one quick enough, we were able to do something about it, and he is now a healthy and rambunctious tripod that graduated oncology almost 2 years later. On him, I still get hit, almost 3 years later, with waves of awful grief about our tabby. I couldn't eat or sleep well or stop crying for weeks after we lost our little guy. However, to some assholes, we would get but it's just a cat. What the fudge is the big deal? Just get another one. Sigh. Story 109. Losing your sense of taste. I had to take some anti-cancer medication last year, and it eliminated my taste buds for 12 months. It was an absolutely horrible experience. Story 110. Being bullied and verbally abused by a doctor, trying to strong-arm you into taking a med procedure that is not medically necessary. Story 111. Having a mom who simultaneously shoot on your dad with you in private while also not protecting you from his tantrums. Story 112. Intrusive thoughts, they really get in the way of everything and can be so loud when you don't want to deal with it at all. Story 113. The process of some diagnosis, even if it comes back clear, and sometimes especially if it comes back clear. I'm in my 30s and healthy. Spontaneously, my right arm and leg went lame, and I had aggressive twitches constantly. I was afraid. I did so many MRI, CT scans, heart tests, over 100 labs. I lost my 14-year managerial job. They sent me to an MS specialist who confirmed numerous lesions on my brain. Looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, so I was convinced I had MS. They have to wait a year and a half to confirm if the lesions grew, followed by a lumbar puncture to confirm. And in that time, I think I might have lost my mind. Like I was this 14-year sales manager winning awards, and next thing I know, I'm in bed for 6 months, barely verbal, and everything is falling apart. I tried therapy, and every therapist I contacted said they don't help with health-related issues, which sent me to the bottom. The year passed, and they confirmed the lesions were related to migraines and that I had a minor stroke, not MS. Physically, I was back to normal. I remember the doctors saying this is good news, but I was so darn broken, I was almost mad that I lost everything for nothing. Your mind is more fragile than you think. Story 114. Chronic 24/7 pain. It can mentally mess you up. From people not believing you, testing, doctors, meds and surgery, etc. Story 115. Watching your sibling who was the most sweetest, kindest, considerate person you knew grew up with get schizophrenia. They are still alive, but they are gone. It changes the whole family's lives. My father and I both have PTSD from it. It's very traumatic, heartbreaking. Words can't describe. Story 116. Being bullied has affected my self-confidence and my mental health. The self-doubt, the struggle for acceptance every time, and it eats you from the inside, even after 15 years. They say time heals all wounds, but it didn't. It sometimes creep on you when you least expect it. Story 117. A parent who constantly makes you feel guilty because you're not 100, coddling their emotions as though they are an infant in constant need of affection with a very fragile ego and weak emotional state. Daily guilt trips from a parent makes it hard for the child to interact with people the rest of their life and leaves trauma and shame once the parent passes on. Story 118. Being fat shamed as a kid and into adulthood, or being body shamed in general. I only know about being fat shamed. It just makes you feel worthless for the rest of your life. Story 119. Long-term hospital stay. The majority of people grow into a delusion state where they outright forget why they're even in hospital. Alongside becoming paranoid about the people treating them, it's called intensive care delirium. I've experienced it myself at one point. As a person without any pre-existing conditions, the nurses were making fun and being abusive to other patients. Also lost my sense of sense as well. Like the hospital was my whole world, and I'd never be able to leave. Even tried to escape a few times. Story 120. Difficult childbirth as a birth partner, and it's way less traumatic than the person giving birth themselves. Being rushed into scrubs and taken into theater for an emergency cesarean after pointlessly going through 30 hours labor. Seeing a note on the wall saying if blood loss more than 1,000 minimum or sign 1,000 lives, document whatever the fudge that means. Then a log on a whiteboard saying blood loss is 1,200, so she is hemorrhaging. Then you're trying to comfort and clean up your missus who is so full of gear, 2 lots of morphine, induction hormones, then more gear to reverse it because the contractions were too frequent, that she is passing in and out of consciousness while being sick on herself, then in the lucid moments, despairing, asking why her son is silent, then seeing 3 doctors around your completely stationary son trying to get him to breathe. Then you check what's showing on with your son in a moment of unconsciousness and see your missus' intestines. Probably all standard practice, but I fist it into a used coffee cup and pop it into the canal of the subconscious, Alan Partridge style. Story 121. Emotional and physical abuse as a child, including watching your siblings experience the same. I've still got CPTSD and anxiety from my childhood. I've managed with time and therapy to function well enough that my life isn't a mess anymore, but it's like an imprint that I will always have and have to manage. Story 122. Look at me, upvoting everything in solidarity, having emotionally stunted parents who don't know how to prioritize anything over themselves, not feeling safe in your own home, not being allowed to have emotions yourself while having to manage the emotional state of the adults around you. Both my parents were like this, although to varying degrees. I have a developmentally disabled brother who I basically raised since my mom was mentally ill and emotionally stunted. She and my dad had a really acrimonious divorce that lasted 3 years, and she started dating someone who abused me for 8 years and also encouraged her to keep us from our dad. Once I was able to turn him in, she then replicated what she'd gone through as a kid when she reported her abuser and prioritized him over me for the next 6 years while spiraling further into alcoholism. I moved out at 18 and nobody could really handle my brother but me, so he developed a lot of bad habits which we're still remediating to this day. My dad became bitter and angry that I wouldn't take care of him and I wouldn't put up with his mean-spirited jokes about my weight or failure at parenting my brother. Anyways, it was a clusterfuck LOL. Lots of therapy and both my parents have since passed. I am guardian of my brother and have had an amazing husband of 22 years. I now have an almost 1-year-old and I don't plan on doing anything even remotely in the realm of how they raised me. It was how they were raised. They did the best they could with how they were taught, but it wasn't good. Story 123. Developing long COVID through the lack of precaution from loved ones. Then they minimize it despite science telling them they're objectively wrong. Story 124. Having parents who work too much. Working too much means working too much to pick your kid up on time and you leave them waiting at home alone. Working too much to have time in the morning to ask your kids about school and their friends. Working too much to have the energy to deal with your kid having a meltdown over very normal kid problems. Working too much to show up to the things your kid cares about. If you're working too much to consistently show up for your kid, you are creating trauma for them. You are leaving them alone to figure the world out. And while a bit of that is healthy, too much of it is too much. Story 125. Neglect. It's not dramatic, but it burns. You don't realize it was abuse until you're older, though. Story 126. Growing up undiagnosed. I went my whole life knowing something was wrong with me, but I didn't know what was wrong with me. I could see it in pictures of me too, that something was different about me compared to everyone else in the pictures. I could see it in some people's faces when they'd look at me too. They'd look at me like I was inferior to them. They'd talk to me like I was stupid too. I'm just autistic and never got help navigating it as a kid. I had to figure it all out on my own. Story 127. Having a parent that says that never happened when you mention things they did or said as you were a kid. Story 128. Falling in love, being with a narcissist. It's a special kind of hell because before you even realize what is going on, they've already roped you in and started in on the emotional damage. You constantly question if it was actually that bad or if you were just overreacting, remembering things wrong, and then convince yourself it wasn't bad. The little jabs or harsh words they throw at you, you will absolutely believe you deserved it or it was your fault because they will charm their jerk off, making you believe their narrative. It's super toxic and damaging mentally and emotionally. Then when you finally are over it and ready to leave, they love bomb and charm you for a while until the cycle starts over again. Rinse, repeat. Currently going through this as we speak, and now I realize it. I'm getting therapy and breaking the cycle. Story 129. Chronic illness. As someone who deals with lupus, it's a lot more traumatic than people realize. It's always being in a state of survival. Story 130. Being cheated on. Cheating seems to be socially acceptable now more than ever, but for people delusional enough to still be monogamous, cheating can do some real traumatic things. The trust issues are just the tip of the iceberg. Story 131. Being chronically ill. I think to many people, chronic illness sounds like being sick all the time. That's true, kind of, but it's so much bigger. It means undergoing painful and invasive tests, waiting day, sour weeks, even years for any kind of basic information about what is happening to you and when, if ever, it might let up. And meanwhile, people don't and cannot understand your experience. Not even if they love you. You're totally alone, watching life continue to unfold for everyone around you, while you have been spending your days getting infusions in a hospital or your living room, and nothing changes, and your friends and family stop asking about your life because what is there to say? And friends you thought would stand by you become uncomfortable or feel the don't know how to be there for someone so sick, and you can never join them in socializing anyway, so they stop calling. The illness changes you physically so much that you feel like, with all of this piled on, you've lost yourself completely. It's like you've died and you're haunting the life you had. Story 132. I'm going to list one that will probably make some people mad. Growing up in a religious home, especially Christianity, imagine showing a bunch of kids ages 4-13 a video of the rapture that plays like a horror movie. However, unlike a horror movie where adults will say, "It's not real, it's just a movie," they say, "This is real, this can happen at any time, and if you aren't ready, you'll be left behind." Then also teach them if they do anything wrong, that they'll burn for eternity. And everyone does something wrong at some point in their life, so when they do, they'll question and have anxiety over if they are going to hell or not. And that's not talking about the fact that a lot of the things the Bible and Christians say are wrong are in fact not wrong. Like being LGBTQ, your religion is based on fear and fueled by dislike disguised as love. Story 133. I like reading posts like this, especially the comments about people's parents, to remind me of how not to treat my children ever. Story 134. Surviving a health event that nearly eliminated you. No one warned me that part of my stroke recovery would be dealing with PTSD. Story 135. Being a cancer survivor. I get triggered constantly at and around medical appointments, even though I've been cancer-free for 9 years. I expected the anxiety would fade, but it has not. Story 136. Getting the cold shoulder from extended family who you thought you were close to. No real reason, just no communication to you, only among themselves. Story 137. Having a cheating and gaslighting spouse. It's a uniquely painful experience. Being made to compete for them, initially with someone they had just met, and them going back and forth as if they're shopping for the best deal. Story 138. Having a relationship with somebody that suffers from a personality disorder. I always keep telling people that unless they are in active therapy, to stay away, and even if they are, it's going to be hard. Story 139. Being called ugly and treated as such as a child. It's instilled in me that I am. I keep getting friends who don't know each other that tell me I'm pretty, and it just feels like pity anymore. Story 140. Being the sibling of someone with severe disability. And having parents who thought you were born with emotional intelligence just because you had regular intelligence. My older brother would physically assault and threaten me from a young age. But I was told to deal with it as he was autistic and I should be more mature than him. I never developed emotional regulation, which led to severe social and mental problems. There were other dysfunctional things too, but having to deal with violence while having it invalidated took the most extreme toll. Story 141. Your spouse cheating on you with someone you thought was a good friend that you have known for a long time. I've lost the ability to trust. Story 142. I am right there with the growing up with a household of emotionally unstable folks. But I'm curious about this one. Growing up with fleas. My parents have had fleas every summer in their house for as long as I can remember. They're in the yard, but they've never had it treated and always have at least one pet that goes between inside and outside. My younger brother and I are now hyper paranoid about pests in our houses, as well as anything that resembles the looks or feel of a flea bite. My boyfriend kind of looks at me funny when I say I would possibly attribute it to something like PTSD, but my brother would agree that we now have what feels like an irrational fear of having fleas in the house. Also, my uncle always had cockroaches and ants in his kitchen, so that's up there too. Story 143. Being homeschooled. 1. Some parents use it to have more control for other types of abuse. Neglect, emotional abuse, religious abuse, physical abuse. 2. Even if your family's great and your parents are fantastic teachers, you still miss out on so many shared moments that other kids your age get by default. You are always an outsider in your own culture. Story 144. Being treated unfairly by a doctor. I don't know if I would go as far as traumatic in every case, but there is something very upsetting about the power dynamics between a sick, vulnerable patient and a doctor who does not care. Story 145. Being the scapegoat of the family. No matter how good you do, it's never enough and always negative. I was first and only one to go to college. Graduated from nursing school and was told, "It's just nursing, you're not a doctor. Nothing is ever good or right no matter what. Brother is a substances addict that can't keep a job and he's too good for those jobs and can't be stuck like you." I cut them all off and can laugh now, but younger, it really affects you. Story 146. Emotional psychological trauma. Physical trauma is not the only type that causes physical manifestation as PTSD. Story 147. A rumor being spread about you that isn't true. No matter what, someone is always going to believe it. Story 148. Being unemployed for an extended period, as long as you're still looking for a job and nothing is coming through. Story 149. Empty promises as a child. So many of my emotional issues as an adult stem from people constantly letting me down growing up. Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. If you'd like to see more content like this, you might be interested to know that I've created another channel with a similar theme, especially for those of you who enjoy what I do. I'll leave a link in the description, and I hope to see you there. Take care.